Oh, wow. Alright, I guess I'll start reading. I'm reading Beyond Good and Evil. Introduction. No, not, I want to read the introduction. Yeah, it's a short introduction. I'll just skip to the preface. The preface. Supposing that truth is a woman, what then? Is there not ground for suspecting that all philosophers, insofar as they have been dogmatists, have failed to understand women? That the terrible seriousness and clumsy importunity with which they have usually paid their addresses to truth have been unskilled and unseemly methods for winning a woman? Certainly she has never allowed herself to be won, and at present every kind of dogma stands with sad and discouraged mind. If indeed it stands at all, for there are scoffers who maintain that it has fallen, that all dogma lies on the ground, nay, more, that it is at its last gasp. But to speak seriously, there are good grounds for hoping that all dogmatizing in philosophy, whatever solemn, whatever conclusive, and decided airs it has assumed, may have been only a noble puerilism and tyrannism, and probably the time is at hand when it will be once and again understood what has actually sufficed for the basis of such imposing and absolute philosophical edifices as the dogmatists have hitherto reared. Perhaps some popular superstition of immemorial times, such as the soul superstition, which, in the form of subjective and ego superstition, has not yet ceased doing mischief. I'm in the walls, I'm in the walls, I'm in the walls. Dude, cool it with that. No one cares about your sister now. We almost just died ourselves. Yes, yes, indeed. Which in the form of subject and ego superstition has not yet ceased doing mischief. Perhaps some play upon words, a deception on the part of grammar, or an audacious generalization of very restricted, very personal, very human, all too human facts. The philosophy of the dogmatists, it is to be hoped, was only a promise for thousands of years afterwards, as was astrology in still earlier times, in the service of which probably more labor, gold, acuteness, and patience have been spent than on any actual science hitherto. We owe it to it and to its super-terrestrial pretensions in Asia and Egypt, the grand style of architecture, it seems, that in order to inscribe themselves upon the heart of humanity with everlasting claims, all great things have first to wander about the earth as enormous and awe-inspiring caricatures. Dogmatic philosophy has. Is this the ego and the id, or what is it? No, it's Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche. It's one of the inspirations for, like, the philosophy behind Berserk. Never mind, it's clearly Fountainhead. No, it's not Fountainhead. Do you actually think it's Fountainhead? They all sound pretty similar. Been a caricature of this kind, for instance, the Vedanta doctrine in Asia and Platonism in Europe. Let us not be ungrateful to it, although it must certainly be confessed that the worst, the most tiresome, and the most dangerous of errors hitherto has been a dogmatist error, namely Plato's invention of pure spirit and the good in itself. But now, when it has been surmounted, when Europe, rid of this nightmare, can again draw breath freely and at least enjoy a healthier sleep, we, whose duty is wakefulness itself, are the heirs of all the strength which the struggle against this error has fostered. It amounted to the very inversion of truth and the denial of the perspective. The fundamental what the are you putting the freaking emoji things? Just the mentioning of architecture. Oh. Plato spoke of them. Indeed, one might ask a physician, how did such a malady attack that finest product of antiquity? Plato had the wicked Socrates really corrupted him? Was Socrates after all a corrupter of youths, and deserved his hemlock? But the struggle against Plato, or to speak plainer, and for the people, the struggle against the ecclesiastical oppression of millenniums of Christianity, for Christianity is Platonism for the people, produced in Europe a magnificent tension of soul, such as had not existed anywhere previously, with such a tensely strained bow one can now aim at the furthest goals. As a matter of fact, the European feels this tension as a state of distress, and twice attempts have been made in grand style to unbend the bow, once by means of Jesuitism, and the second time by means of democratic enlightenment. I genuinely hate this I genuinely hate this emoji thing since it covers chat. I mean, it doesn't for me. Mine doesn't cover my chat. Fact brings it about. I mean, it probably does for people that are actually trying to read it off of that are watching the stream on YouTube, but since it's on my phone right here, it doesn't have it covering it. With these emojis, I'm contributing as much as hard luck. Well, now Hard Luck doesn't even friggin' respond to anything. He literally just responds with emojis now. The Germans invented gunpowder, all credit to them, but they again made things square. They invented printing, but we who are neither Jesuits nor Democrats or even sufficiently Germans, we good Europeans, and free, very free spirits, we have it still, all the distress of spirit, and all the tension of this bow, and perhaps also the arrow, the duty, and, who knows, the goal to aim at. Chapter 1, Prejudices of Philosophers. The will to truth, which is to tempt us to many a hazardous enterprise, the famous truthfulness of which all philosophers have hitherto spoken with respect. What questions has this will? Postal 3 might be the worst game I've played. Yeah, it looks pretty bad. The last mission really pushed me over the edge. I bet, because it's not even a game you're supposed to play at all. As this will to truth not laid before us, what strange, perplexing, questioning questionably. It is already a long story, yet it seems as if it were hardly commenced. Is it any wonder if we at last grow distrustful, lose patience, and turn impatiently away? That this Sphinx teaches us at last to ask questions ourselves. Who is it really that puts questions to us here? What really is this will to truth in us? In fact, we made a long halt at the question as to the origin of this will, until at last we came to an absolute standstill before a yet more fundamental question. We inquired about the value of this will. Granted that we want the truth, why not rather untruth and uncertainty, even ignorance? The problem of the value of truth presented itself before us, or was it we who presented ourselves before the problem? Which of us is the Oedipus here? Which the Sphinx? It would seem to be a rendezvous and of questions and notes of interrogation. And could it be believed that it at last seems to us as if the problem had never been propounded before, as if we were the first to discern it, get a sight of it, and risk raising it? For there is a risk in raising it, perhaps there is no greater risk. How could anything originate out of its opposite? For example, truth out of error, or the will to truth out of the will to deception, or the generous deed out of selfishness, or the pure sun-bright vision of the wise man out of covetousness. Such a genesis is impossible. Whoever dreams of it is a fool, nay, worse than a fool. Things of the highest value must have a different origin, an origin of their own. In this transitory, seductive, illusory, paltry world, in this turmoil of delusion and cupidity, they cannot have. The last mission really. Oh, wait. The guy won't even follow me, and he needs to complete the mission. I was hoping it'd be like Duke Nukem Forever, where people were just wrong, but no, it's genuinely terrible. I think Malachi was going for a Dr. Claw type thing with the way he kept petting the shark. The way he kept petting the shark, that video, he was really, like, he thinks he's being cute is the impression I got. Like, he thinks he's being like, oh, look at me, I'm a real feminine woman. Look at me petting this cute little shark. One second, take a quick break here. I might do a stream after this where I play Silent Hill 2 again. I think it's really funny that Malachi said he liked Bill Hicks a lot, though. Like, I'm sure that there's certain things that Bill Hicks has said that if he had heard, he definitely wouldn't like him. But yeah, he's clearly being try-hard to think being quirky and thinks it would make him seem more like a girl. It's really funny, though, he has comments disabled now. I mean, if he has comments disabled, why doesn't he just fucking make videos again? Like, if your comments are, like, nobody can fuck with you if your comments disabled, just make whatever the fucking videos you want. Like, the kind of shit Andy would say. Andy literally just says people should just always disable their comments. So, literally following Andy's advice. The shark is the gayest thing he's done in a video. It's even gayer than when he said he likes Fudas for being the best of both worlds. So does he actually like both worlds? Because that is definitely the gayest way to word that. It's like, oh yeah, it's the best of both worlds. The best of a woman and the best of a man's cock. The cock's the best part of the man. Oh, he said he's bi multiple times? Is he really? I feel like he's just straight, but, like, fucking thinks he's gay for, like, bonus points or something. Alright, time to fucking continue reading this shit. He calls himself abrosexual now, which is just bi, but with more words. He's brosexual? I'm pretty sure that just means gay. He's abrosexual. Their source, but rather in the lap of being, in the intransitory, in the concealed God, in the thing in itself, there must be their source, and nowhere else. This mode of reasoning discloses the typical prejudice by which metaphysicians of all times can be recognized. This mode of valuation is at the back of all their logical procedure. Through this belief of theirs, they exert themselves for their knowledge, for something that is in the end solemnly christened the truth. The fundamental belief of metaphysicians is the belief in antithesis of values. It never occurred even to the wariest of them, no doubt, here on the very threshold, where doubt, however, was most necessary, though they had made a solemn vow, de omnibus dubitandum, for it may be doubted, firstly, whether antithesis exists at all, and secondly, whether the popular valuations and antithesis of value upon which metaphysicians have set their seal are not perhaps merely superficial estimates, merely provisional perspectives, besides being probably made from some corner, perhaps from below, frog perspectives, as it were, to borrow an expression current among painters. Procedure. What? I'm pretty sure what he got from the doctor was the opposite of a procedure. In spite of all the value which may belong to the true, the positive, and the unselfish, it might be possible that a higher and more fundamental value of life generally should be assigned to pretense, to the will, to delusion of selfishness and cupidity. It might even be possible that what precisely in their being insidiously related, knotted, and crocheted to these evil, oh, I got an itch in my eye, and apparently opposed things, perhaps even in being essentially identical with them, perhaps, but who wishes to concern himself with such dangerous perhapses? For that investigation one must await the advent of a new order of philosophers, such as will have over tastes and inclinations, the reverse of those hitherto prevalent, philosophers of the dangerous perhaps in every sense of the term, and to speak in all seriousness, I see such new philosophers beginning to appear. Having kept a sharp eye on philosophers, and having read between their lines long enough, I now say to myself that the greater part of conscious thinking must be counted among the instinctive functions, and it is so even in the case of philosophical thinking. One is here to learn anew, as one learned anew about heredity and innateness. As little as the act of birth comes into consideration in the whole process and procedure of heredity, just as little as being conscious opposed to the instinctive in any decisive sense. The greater part of the conscious thinking of a philosopher is secretly influenced by his instincts and forced into definite channels, and behind all logic and its seeming sovereignty of movement there are valuations, or to speak more plainly, psychological demands for the maintenance of a definite mode of life. For example, that the certain is worth more than the uncertain, that illusion is less valuable than the truth. Such valuations, in spite of their regulative importance for us, might notwithstanding be only superficial valuations, special kinds of naysari, such as may be necessary for the maintenance of beings such as ourselves, supposing in effect that man is not just the measure of things. The falseness of an option is not for us any objection to it. It is here perhaps that our new language sounds most strangely. The question is, how far in opinion is life furthering, life preserving, species preserving, perhaps species rearing? And we are fundamentally inclined to maintain that the falsest opinions to which the synthetic judgments a priori belong, are the most indispensable to us, that without a recognition of logical fictions, without a comparison of reality with the purely imagined world of the absolute and immutable, without a constant counterfeiting of the world by means of numbers, man could not live, and the renunciation of false opinions would be a renunciation of life, a negation of life. To recognize untruth as a condition of life, that is certainly no impugn in that is certainly to impugn the traditional ideas of value in a dangerous manner, and a philosophy which ventures to do so has thereby alone placed itself beyond good and evil. That which causes philosophers to be regarded half distrustfully and half mockingly is not the oft-repeated discovery how innocent they are, how often and easily they make mistakes and lose their way, in short, how childish and childlike they are, but that there is not enough honest dealing with them, whereas they all raise a loud and virtuous outcry when the problem of truthfulness is even hinted at in the remotest manner. They all pose as though their real opinions had been discovered and attained through the self-evolving of a cold, pure, divinely indifferent dialectic, inconstant to all sorts of mystics who fairer and foolish talk of inspiration, whereas in fact a prejudiced proposition, idea, or suggestion, which is generally their heart's desire abstracted and refined, is defended by them with arguments sought out after the event. They are all advocates who do not wish to be regarded as such, generally astute defenders also of their prejudices, which they dub truths, and very far from having the conscience which bravely admits this to itself, very far from having the good taste of the courage which goes so far as to let this be understood. Perhaps to warn friend or foe, or in cheerful confidence and self-ridicule, the spectacle of the tartuffery of old Kant. Is it Kant? I think it's Kant. Equally stiff and decent, with which he entices us into the dialectic by ways that lead. It's funny how each of these streams has gotten progressively less regarded. Yeah. Well, this one's because, well, this one I'm trying to keep a more lower tone of volume. So I just gotta read more casually right now. Damn it. I hope this is where I was at. With which he entices us into the dialectic by ways that lead, more correctly mislead, to his categorical imperative, makes us fastidious. Once smile, we who find no small amusement in spying out the subtle tricks of old moralists and ethical preachers, or still more so the hocus-pocus in mathematical form by means of which Spinoza has, as it were, clad his philosophy in mail and mask, in fact the love of his wisdom, to translate the term fairly and squarely, in order thereby to strike terror at once into the heart of the assailant, who should dare to cast a glance on that invincible maiden, that Pallas Athene. How much of personal timidity and vulnerability does this masquerade of a sickly recluse betray? It has gradually become clear to me that every great philosophy up till now has consisted of, namely, the confession of its originator, and a species of involuntary and unconscious autobiography, and moreover that the moral or immoral purpose in every philosophy has constituted the true vital germ out of which the entire plant has always grown. Indeed, to understand this one is actually a reading stream as opposed to whatever the hell the last two were. Yeah, a lot more reading actually in this one. abstrusest metaphysical assertions of a philosopher have been arrived at, it is always well and wise to first ask oneself what morality do they or does he aim at. Accordingly, I do not believe that an impulse to knowledge is the father of philosophy, but that another impulse here as elsewhere has only made us of knowledge and mistaken knowledge as an instrument. But whoever considers the fundamental impulses of man with a view of determining how far they may have acted as inspiring genii or as demons and kobolds will find that they have all practiced philosophy at one time or another, and that each of them would have been only too glad to look upon itself as the ultimate end of existence and the legitimate lord over all other impulses. For every impulse is imperious, and as such attempts to philosophize. To be sure, in the case of scholars, in the case of really scientific men, it may be otherwise better, if you will. There may really be such a thing as an impulse to knowledge, some kind of small, independent clockwork, which, when well wound up, works away industriously to that end, without the rest of the scholarly impulses taking any material part therein. The actual interests of the scholar, therefore, are generally in quite another direction. In the family, perhaps, or in money-making, or in politics. It is, in fact, almost indifferent at what point of research his little machine is placed, and whether the hopeful young worker becomes a good philologist, a mushroom specialist, or a chemist. He is not characterized by becoming this or that. I should start my Red Eye Rewind series soon, where I just stream and comment on my old content. Yeah, you should. In the philosopher, on the contrary, there is absolutely nothing impersonal, and above all, his morality furnishes a decided and decisive testimony as to who he is, what is to say, in what order the deepest impulses of his nature stand to each other. How malicious philosophers can be. I know of nothing more stinging than the joke Epicurus took the liberty of making on Plato and the Platonists. He called them Dionysiocalax. I don't know what the heck that word is. It is, in its original sense and on the face of it, the word signifies flatterers of Dionysus. Consequently, tyrants, accessories, and lickspittles. Besides this, however, it is as much as to say they are all actors. There is nothing genuine about them, for Dionysiocalax was a popular name for an actor, and the latter is really the malignant reproach that Epicurus cast upon Plato. He was annoyed by the grandiose manner, the mise-en-scene, style of which Plato and his scholars were masters, of which Epicurus was not a master. He, the old-school teacher of Samos, who sat concealed in his little garden at Athens, and wrote 300 books, perhaps out of rage and ambiguous envy of Plato. Who knows? Greece took 100 years to find out who the garden god Epicurus really was. Did she ever find out? There is a point in every philosophy at which the conviction of the philosopher appears on the scene, or put in the words of an ancient mystery. Adventative asinus culture et fortissimus. Oh man, I need to take a drink. Ooh, ah, ah, ah. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, ah, ah, ah. Rude fucking doll. Out of all the people we've had beef with, I think I like Hard Luck the least. Yeah, that's probably why I don't really, like, Now I don't really care to make content about him any. I did the one video about him. That's probably all I'm ever gonna do, because I think now, like, yeah, I don't like him enough to even want to make content out of him. He's not like a fun person to he's not really a fun person to make fun of. He's just kind of a dick. I need to make some Cucumber Clan videos, is what I need to do. Hello everybody, Cucumber Clan here. Yeah, I saw you uploaded that. The best part was when he shoved the cucumber up his stinky anus. You desire to live according to nature, oh you noble Stoics. What a fraud of words. See this part, he's literally making fun of Stoics. That which is, I think, funny, because I think like Stoicism is like obviously a good thing. Imagine to yourselves a being like nature, boundlessly extravagant, boundlessly indifferent, without purpose or consideration, without pity or justice, at once fruitful and barren and uncertain. Imagine to yourselves indifference as a power. How could you live in accordance with such indifference? To live is not that just endeavoring to be otherwise than this nature. Is not living, valuing, preferring, being unjust, being limited, endeavoring to be different? And granted that your imperative, living according to nature, means actually the same as living according to life. How could you do differently? Why would you make a principle out of what you yourselves are and must be? In reality, however, it is quite otherwise with you. While you pretend to read with rapture the canon of your law in nature, you want something quite the contrary. You extraordinary stage players and self-deluders, in your pride you wish to dictate your morals and ideals to nature herself, and to incorporate them therein. You insist that it shall be nature according to the Stoa, and would like everything to be made after your own image, as a vast eternal glorification and generalism of Stoicism. Yeah, that's what I thought. He calls him. That's what that's what I assumed, was he was basically like Chris Chan, where he's just like, I'm a lesbian. I'm a I'm a lesbian. But I mean, like, after reading Nietzsche's description of Stoics, he's like, this is what Stoics believe. You believe in living in according to nature, and having the power to, and you're prideful, and like you want to have control. It's like, yeah, this is all good things. Nietzsche's like acting like this is all like bad stuff. I don't get it. Which all your love for truth you have forced yourselves so long, so persistently, and with such hypnotic rigidity, to see nature falsely, that is to say, stoically, that you are no longer able to see it otherwise, and to crown all some unfathom. That's because it's the right way to view it. The reason when you view it stoically, you can't view it otherwise. It's the realistic way to look at it, I think. Some unfathomable supercilly. What the hell is this word? Superculousness gives you the bedlamite hope that because you are able to tyrannize over yourselves, Stoicism is self-tyranny. Nature will also throw herself to be tyrannized over. Is not the Stoic a part of nature? But this is an old and everlasting story. What happened in old times with the Stoics still happens today. As soon as ever A philosophy begins to believe in itself. It always creates the world in its own image. It cannot do otherwise. Philosophy is the tyrannical impulse itself, the most spiritual will to power, the will to creation of the world, the will to causa prima. Well, isn't the whole point that you should will your power? Isn't that good? Hello, Stephen, my old friend. Why, hello, if it isn't my old friend Stephen. How the hell have you been keeping then? Nietzsche definitely has some things I disagree with, as does any philosopher. Well, yeah, there's lots of things I disagree with and agree with on Nietzsche. Like, there's lots of stuff that in Nietzsche that, like, Ayn Rand obviously was inspired by, even though she doesn't admit that all the time. But, like, obviously, there's lots of ideas in Nietzsche that are really influential and important, especially in things like psychology. And also certain Nazi movements. I mean, come on. All good things equally. I'm reading Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, Stephen. And I'll start doing that now. The eagerness and subtlety, I should even say craftiness, with which the problem of the real and the apparent world is dealt with at present throughout Europe furnishes food for thought and attention, and he who hears only a will to truth in the background and nothing else cannot certainly boast of the sharpest ears. In rare and isolated cases, it may really have happened that such a will to truth, a certain extravagant and adventurous pluck, a metaphysician's ambition of the forlorn hope, has participated therein, that with which in the end always prefers a handful of certainty to a whole cartload of beautiful possibilities. There may even be pertinacial fanatics of conscience who prefer to put their last trust in a sure nothing rather than in an uncertain something. But that is nihilism, and the sign of a despairing, mortally wearied soul, notwithstanding the courageousness bearing such a virtue may display. It seems, however, to be otherwise with stronger and livelier thinkers, who are still eager for life, in that they side against appearance and speak I swear to God, this word. Supercilious. He really likes this word. Keeps making me freaking stumble on it. Superciliously of perspective, in that they rank the credibility of their own bodies about as low as the credibility of the ocular evidence that the earth stands still, and thus apparently allowing with complacency their securest possession to escape. For what does one at present believe in more firmly than in one's body? Hello, Stephen, my old friend. How the hell you been keeping then? 3 people watching. Oh my God, the pressure. Who knows if they are not really trying to win back something which was formerly an even securer possession, something of the old domain of the faith of former times, perhaps the immortal soul, perhaps the old God. In short, ideas by which they could live better, that is to say, more vigorously and more joyously than by modern ideas. There is distrust of these modern ideas in this mode of looking at things, a disbelief in all that has been constructed yesterday and today. There is perhaps some slight admixture of satiety and scorn, which can no longer endure the bric-a-brac of ideas of the most varied origin, such as so-called positivism at present throws on the market, a disgust of the more refined taste of the village fair moteliness and patchiness of all these reality philosophasters, in whom there is nothing either new or true except the moteliness. Therein it seems to me that we should agree with those skeptical anti-realists and knowledge microscopists of the present day. Their instinct, which repels them from modern reality, is unrefuted. What do their retrograde bypaths concern us? The main thing about them is not that they wish to go back, but that they wish to get away therefrom. A little more strength, swing, courage, and artistic power, and they would be off and not back. Hey man, how are you doing? Wait, no, it's fun. Oh, I'm doing fine. Reading Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche. It's funny how Ayn Rand pretends to hate every philosopher other than Aristotle. Yeah, especially since her philosophy is still like extremely different from Aristotle, and there's lots more other philosophers that she definitely is somewhat inspired by Nietzsche, and she even she literally hates Kant and always wants to bring up how much she doesn't like Kant, but there's certain ideas that she believes in that she gets from Kant. There's something about Kant that, because I feel like these people, whenever they really hate somebody, it's always because they see it as some sort of reflection of themselves or something. I think there's something about Kant that Ayn Rand really didn't like, because she said Kant was worse than Marx, which I don't agree with that. Kant definitely is. I understand what she means, because Kant's sort of anti-reality, I guess, in her vision, which kind of accurate, but there's lots of inspirations in modern morality from Kant that. Hey. No, I already read that. He set upon himself. Kant was. Yeah, now Nietzsche's bringing up Kant. Kant was first and foremost proud of his table of categories. With it in his hand, he said, "This is the most difficult." Also, I think Ayn Rand also got her hate of Kant from Nietzsche, because Nietzsche also criticizes Kant a lot. Difficult thing that could ever be undertaken on behalf of metaphysics. Let us only understand this could be. He was proud of having discovered a new faculty in me, the faculty of synthetic judgment, a priori, granting that he deceived himself in the matter. The development and rapid flourishing of German philosophy depended nevertheless on his pride and on the eager rivalry of the younger generation to discover, if possible, something, at all events, new faculties of which to be still prouder. But let us reflect for a moment. It is high time to do so. How are synthetic judgments a priori possible? Kant asks himself, and what is really his answer? By means of a means, faculty, but unfortunately not in 5 words, but so circumstantially, imposingly, and with such display of German profundity and verbal flourishes, that one altogether loses sight of the comical necessary allemande. I don't know how to say these freaking words. Involved in such an answer, people were beside themselves with delight over the new faculty, and the jubilation reached its climax when Kant further discovered a moral faculty in man. For at that time, Germans were still moral, not yet dabbling in the politics of hard fact. Then came the honeymoon of German philosophy. All the young theologians of the Tübingen institution went immediately into the groves, all seeking for faculties. And what did they not find in that innocent, rich, and still youthful period of the German spirit, to which romanticism and malicious fairy piped and sang, when one could not yet distinguish between finding and inventing? Above all, a faculty for the transcendental, Schelling christened it intellectual intuition, and thereby gratified the most earnest longings of the naturally pious inclined Germans. I hate this vertical layout. Yeah. Well, I'm literally only showing my ceiling. It doesn't really matter. But I do hate it, yeah. But, it's literally just because I have my phone angled this way. But, I didn't care. I'm just setting it on the stand. All I'm doing is reading. What do you think Nietzsche would think of his impact on German society? I think he did many. He said many things about how he didn't like it. Like, he himself knew that there were, like, Nazi movements that were, like, being inspired by his books, and he did not like it. One can do no greater wrong to the whole of his exuberant and eccentric movement, which was really youthfulness notwithstanding, that is, disguised itself so boldly in hoary and senile conceptions, than to take it seriously or even treat it with moral indignation. Enough, however, the world grew older, and that dream vanished. A time came when people rubbed their foreheads, and they still rub them today. People had been dreaming, and first and foremost old Kant, by means of a means faculty, he had said, or at least meant to say, but is that an answer, an explanation, or is it not rather merely a repetition of the question? How does opium induce sleep? By means of a means faculty, namely that virtus dormitiva, replies the doctor in Malary. Oh wow, more fucking shit in other languages I can't read. I'll just skip it. But such replies belong to the realm of comedy, and it is high time to replace. I'm really glad that they didn't translate that, so I can't even know what it means in English. But such replies belong to the realm of comedy, and it is high time to replace the Kantian question, how are synthetic judgments a priori possible, by another question, why is belief in such... I feel like I'm in one of those TikTok live streams. Fucking foreigners, am I right? Yeah, it is like one of those TikTok live streams, I guess, with the way it's formatted. At least I have my flag in my background, which is a lot cooler than the flag Malachi had in the background of his last video, I will say. As regards materialistic atomism... Seriously, is this where I'm at? Did I just read this paragraph? No, I didn't. Mince necessary. In effect, it is high time that we should understand that such judgments must be believed to be true. For the sake of the preservation of creatures like ourselves, though they still might naturally be false judgments, or more plainly spoken and roughly and readily, synthetic judgments a priori should not be possible at all. We have no right to them. In our mouths they are nothing but false judgments. Only, of course, the belief in their truth is necessary, as plausible belief and ocular evidence belong to the perspective view of life. And finally, to call to mind the enormous influence which German philosophy, I hope you understand, is right to inverted commas, goose feet, has exercised throughout the whole of Europe. There is no doubt that a certain virtus dormitiva had a share in it. Thanks to German philosophy, it was a delight to the noble idlers, the virtuous, the mystics, the artists, the three-fourths Christians, and the political obscurantists of all nations to find an antidote to the still overwhelming sensualism which overflowed from the last century into this, in short, sensus ausupiri. I don't know. Lol, he has a new vid. Also, yeah, he has a new vid. It's not good. He's like petting like this weird shark. Like he's petting a stuffed shark the whole time. And like the only funny part was when he showed a few seconds of Bill Hicks. Also, Sarge has said negative things about Jews a lot, so it might not make sense to have him support Israel unless we give him a reason, like saying some conservative talk show host convinced him. Yeah. Yeah, Steven, and he's just sitting petting a shark plushie trying to be cute and quirky. Felt cute, might pet a shark later. Believe, contrary to all senses, that the earth does not stand fast. Bosovich that has taught us to abjure the belief in the last thing that stood fast on the earth, the belief in substance and matter, in the earth residuum, a particle atom. It is the greatest triumph over the senses that has hitherto been gained on earth. One must, however, go still further and also declare war, relentless war to the knife, against the atomistic requirements which still lead a dangerous afterlife in places where no one suspects them. Like the more celebrated metaphysical requirements, one must also, above all, give the finishing stroke to that other and more portentous atomism which Christianity has taught best and longest, the soul atomism. Atomism, I guess, would be the best way to say it. I don't know. Let it be permitted to designate by this expression the belief which regards the soul as something indestructible, eternal, indivisible, as a monad, as an atomon. The monad is what the Gnostics believe is God. That's really cringe. I'm gonna see it. Not to mention Sarge's hate for foreigners doesn't leave a lot of room for him to be anything other than a nationalist. Yeah. I went on Captain Hardluck channel and dislike all of his videos and shorts. Okay, I don't think it changes much of anything. It's funny though, whenever I watch his videos, I always like them. Whenever I do that with literally everybody I mess with, I just like all their videos. Between ourselves, it is not at all necessary to get rid of the soul, thereby and thus renounce one of the oldest and most ventured hypotheses, as happens frequently to the clumsiness of naturalists who can hardly touch on the soul without immediately losing it. But the way is open for new acceptations and refinements of the soul hypothesis, and such conceptions as mortal soul and soul of subjective multiplicity and soul as social structure of the instincts and passions want henceforth to have legitimate rights in science, in that the new psychologist is about to put an end to the superstitions which have hitherto flourished with almost tropical luxuriance around the idea of the soul. He is really, as it were, thrusting himself into a new desert and a new distrust. It is possible that the older psychologist had a merrier and more comfortable time of it. Eventually, however, he finds that precisely thereby he is also condemned to invent, and who knows, perhaps to discover the new. Psychologists should bethink. I bethunk it myself a few times. Psychologists should bethink themselves before putting down the instinct of self-preservation as the cardinal instinct of an organic being. A living thing seeks above all to discharge, he said discharge, its strength. Life itself is will to power. Self-preservation is only one of the indirect and most frequent results thereof. In short, here as everywhere else, let us beware of superfluous teleological principles, one of which is the instinct of self-preservation. We owe it to Spinoza's inconsistency. It is thus, in effect, that method ordains which must be essentially economy of principles. It is perhaps just dawning on 5 or 6 minds that natural philosophy is only a world exposition and world arrangement according to us, if I may say so, and not a world explanation, but insofar as it is based on belief on the senses, it is regarded as more, and for a long time to come must be regarded as more, namely, as an explanation. It has eyes and fingers of its own. It has ocular evidence and palpableness of its own. This operates fascinatingly, persuasively, and convincingly upon an age with fundamentally plebeian tastes. In fact, it follows instinctively the canon of truth of eternal popular sensualism. What is clear, what is explained, only that which can be seen and felt. One must pursue every problem thus far. Observably, however, the charm of the Platonic mode of thought, which was an aristocratic mode, consisted precisely in resistance to obvious sense evidence. Perhaps among men who enjoyed even stronger and more fastidious senses than our contemporaries, but who knew how to find a higher triumph in remaining masters of them, and this by means of pale, cold, gray conceptional networks which they threw over the motley whirl of the senses, the mob of the senses, as Plato said, in this overcoming of the world, in interpreting of the world in the manner of Plato. There was an enjoyment different from that which the physicists of today offer us, and likewise the Darwinists and anti-theologists among the psychological workers, with their principle of the smallest possible effort and the greatest possible blunder. Where there is nothing more to see or to grasp, there is also nothing more for men to do. That is certainly an imperative different from the Platonic one, but it may notwithstanding be the right imperative for a hardy, laborious race of machinists and bridge builders of the future who have nothing but rough work to perform. The only reason I keep bringing up Sarge is because we discussed it early, since you said he should support Israel. Yeah, I mean, if you think it's too out of character for him, then we won't do it. But I think it's funny though when like boomer conservatives like are just like yeah, I support everything that Fox News says. Look at this base trans conservative. Wow. What? We shouldn't be kicking homos off of Fox News. We should be bringing more on. But I guess Sarge should be based, but the point of Sarge 2 is originally to make fun of conservatives, but I think the way parody works, like Norm Macdonald says, is that parody's like it's best to do and like make fun of somebody when you actually like them, and that's basically how I feel about conservatives. Like I think that there's parts of them that are like foolish in a funny way, but I still like they're still obviously really appealing, and like they're obviously like better than liberals and have endearing facts. They have endearing aspects to them, even though I do consider most of them basically evil in the things that they're willing to justify. I'm debating it since he was supposed to be a parody of conservatives originally, but I don't want to stray too far, so I'm not 100% sure. Fair enough. Billie Jean is not my love. She said, I am the one. That man is not my son. But I think it would be more funny to give Sarge more of like the mainstream conservative opinions and Pedro the more alt-right ones. Like I think that would be like a funny dynamic. But I still think that Sarge should have aspects to his personality like supporting the South and other things like that. Like I think he should be like into some of the more more taboo conservative stuff, but maybe we stray from making him like into the alt-right stuff completely. Yeah. Like, but I don't even, like, even though, like, you were a leftist at the time, it's still a good, character, and there's still lots of aspects of conservatives that are worth parodying. But, I think overall, like, the show still is always going to be, like, a right-leaning show. Like, it's always going to lean that way, obviously. But there's plenty of there's plenty of things that I think are pretty funny now about conservatives, but I'll still watch Fox News, and I'll still watch Daily Wire stuff. I'll still watch all that stuff, but I usually go on BitChute if I want more of the big stuff. But because I do think that conservatives are right to the level that they point out really obvious things about life that a lot of people deny now. Like, I mean that common sense, you know, like, that's one thing I'd like. Conservatives have really good common sense, and that's really important now, because now we're, like, really in a time of confusion and everything, you know, like, I think more people are realizing that everything we believe is, you know, written by certain groups of people that don't necessarily have our best interest. But yet again, conservatives will also give those people money, so. If we go that way, it could also be a commentary on the inconsistencies of conservatives. Yeah, that's a good point. Because I would say the biggest problem with the conservative party currently is the hypocrisy of it, I guess. Like, they are, like, super against globalists when they themselves are globalists, or they'll speak on a side of selfishness and then promote selflessness, or they'll be on, you know, like, there's lots of inconsistencies, or be based about women 1 second and then be simps the next. Lots of small hypocrisies that add up. But not me, though. I'm never a hypocrite about anything, ever. I've got the right idea all the time about everything. I guess right now the issue is, do I lean more into the parody or make it more like myself, since I definitely have made him more like me over time. I think you should just try and do a bit of both, and then see which one you have more fun doing, you know. But Sergeant Friends is clearly one of those shows where we don't really need to be consistency. The characters are all are like super ironic and contradictory characters. No, I don't smoke cigars. Sitars? I don't own any sitars. America, fuck yeah. Although, if we could start adding more objectivist characteristics into Sarge too, that'd be kind of cool. Because I could see Sarge having more of hints of like an old American way of thinking too. Like, I wanted to go back and forth. When I think of Sarge, I think of him as just a resemblance of conservatives in general. But I don't think of him as like an alt-right character. Like, I think that wouldn't really be fitting. Or not alt-right, but new right or whatever. I do try to be consistent at times with lore, etc., though. Yeah, but I think their personalities can be more like, because I think it's still typical of cartoons that characters say things that are contradictory. I mean, like, look at Simpsons and Family Guy and, like, all these other shows. Like, they're pretty contradictory, and I think our show is a lot more outlandish than those shows. I guess we could make him pro-Israel, but he will never be a simp. Yeah, that's good. We also could just have like a retarded conservative character that just represents all the worst flaws of conservatives and just like is absolutely hypocritical. Now let me see. Let me read here. I hope I'm at the right spot. I think I flugged it up again. To study physiology with a clear conscience, one must insist on the fact that the sense organs are not phenomena in the sense of the idealistic philosophy. As such, they certainly could not be causes. Sensualism, therefore, at least as regulative hypothesis, is not as heuristic principle. What? It's funny though, because it literally says "what" with a question mark after I read that. And others say even that the external world in the work of our organs, but then our body as a part of this external world would be the work of our organs, but then our organs themselves would be the work of our organs. What? What? Am I the only one confused? What am I reading? But then our organs themselves would be the work of our organs. It seems to me that this is a complex reductio ad absurdum. If the conception causa sui? What are you, some kind of soy boy? Is something fundamentally absurd. Consequently, the external world is not the work of our organs. That's Nietzsche's thing, is everything's absurd. Because he can't separate subjective and objective reality from each other is, I think, the main problem with Nietzsche. And I think that's why he went crazy. Is because he wasn't willing to commit to certain principles that Ayn Rand could commit herself to. And therefore have logical consistency. And I think Nietzsche didn't really have a foundation of his philosophy. And I think that's sort of representative in the name itself, absurdism. Sorry if I've derailed this into a Sergeant Friends behind the scenes stream. No, it's fine. I want small parts where I get, like, if every once in a while I will take a break for however long, I don't care. Because Sarge has gotten more based over time, so it's a tough balance. Yeah. There are still harmless self-observers who believe that there are immediate certainties, for instance, I think, or as the superstition of Schopenhauer puts it, I will, as though cognition here got hold of its object purely and simply as the thing in itself, without any falsification taking place either on the part of the subject or the object. I would repeat it, however, 100 times, that immediate certainty, as well as absolute knowledge in the thing in itself, involve a contradictio in ejecto. Oh, man. We really ought to free ourselves from the misleading significance of words. The people, on their part, may think that cognition is knowing all about things, but the philosopher must say to himself, when I analyze the process that is expressed in the sentence, I think, I find a whole series of daring assertions, the argumentative proof of which would be difficult, perhaps impossible, for instance, that it is I who think that there must necessarily be something that thinks, that thinking is an activity and operation on the part of a being who is thought of as a cause, that there is an ego, and finally that it is already determined what is to be designated by thinking, that I know what thinking is, for if I had not already decided within myself what it is, By what standard could I determine whether that which is just happening is not perhaps willing or feeling? In short, the assertion "I think" assumes that I compare my state at the present moment with another state of myself which I know, in order to determine what it is, on account of the retrospective connection with further knowledge. It has at any rate no immediate certainty for me. In place of the immediate certainty in which the people may believe in the special case, the philosopher thus finds a series of metaphysical questions presented to him. Veritable conscience questions of the intellect, to wit, from whence did I get the notion of thinking? Why do I believe in cause and effect? What gives me the right to speak of an ego, and even of an ego as cause, and finally of an ego as cause of thought? He who ventures to answer these metaphysical questions at once by an appeal to a sort of intuitive perception, like the person who says, "I think and know that this, at least, is true, actual, and certain," will encounter a smile and two notes of interrogation in a philosopher nowadays. "Sir," the philosopher will perhaps give him to understand, "it is improbable that you are not mistaken, but why should it be the truth?" With regard to the superstitions of logicians, I shall never tire of emphasizing a small terse fact, which is unwillingly recognized by these credulous minds, namely that a thought comes when it wishes and not when I wish, so that it is a perversion of the facts of the case to say that the subject I is the condition of the predicate think. One thinks, but that this one is precisely the famous old ego, is, to put it mildly, only a supposition, an assertion, and assuredly not an immediate certainty. After all, one has even gone too far with this "one thinks." Even the one contains an interpretation of the process, and does not belong to the process itself. One infers here, according to the usual grammatical formula, to think is an activity. Every activity requires an agency that is active. Consequently, it was pretty much on the same lines that the older atomism sought, besides the operating power, the material practical wherein it resides and out of which it operates, the atom. More rigorous minds, however, learnt at last to get along without this earth residuum, and perhaps some day we shall accustom ourselves, even from the logician's point of view, to get along with the little one to which the worthy old ego has refined itself. It is certainly not the least charm of a theory that it is refutable. It is precisely thereby that it attracts the more subtle minds. It seems that the 100 times refuted theory of the free will owes its persistence to this charm alone. Someone is always appearing who feels himself strong enough to refute it. Philosophers are accustomed to speak of the will as though it were the best known thing in the world. Indeed, Schopenhauer has given us to understand that the will alone is really known to us, absolutely and completely known, without deduction or addition. But it again and again seems to me that in the case Schopenhauer also only did what philosophers are in the habit of doing. He seems to have adopted a popular prejudice and exaggerated it. Willing seems to me to be above all something complicated, something that is a unity only in name, and it is precisely in a name that popular prejudice lurks, which has got the mastery over the inadequate precautions of philosophers in all ages. So let us for once be more cautious. Let us be unphilosophical. Let us say that in all willing there is firstly a plurality of sensations, namely the sensation of the condition away from which we go, the sensation of the condition towards which we go, the sensation of this form and towards itself, and then besides an accompanying muscular sensation, which even without our putting in motions arms and legs commences its action, by force of habit. Directly, we will anything. Therefore, just as sensations, and indeed many kinds of sensations, are to be recognized as ingredients of the will, so in the second place thinking it also to be recognized in every act of the will there is a ruling thought, and let us not imagine it possible to sever this thought from the willing, as if the will would then remain over. In the third place, the will is not only a complex of sensation and thinking, but it is above all an emotion, and in fact the emotion of the command, that which is termed freedom of the will, is essentially the emotion of supremacy in respect to him who must obey. I am free. He must obey. This consciousness is inherent in every will, and equally so the straining of the attention, the straight look which fixes itself exclusively on one thing, the unconditional judgment that this and nothing else is necessary now, the inward certainty that obedience will be rendered, and whatever else pertains to the position of the commander, a man who wills commands something within himself which renders obedience, or which he believes renders obedience. But now let us notice what is the strangest thing about the will, this affair so extremely complex, for which the people have only one name, inasmuch as in the given circumstances we are at the same time the commanding and the obeying parties, and as the obeying party we know the sensations of constraint, impulsion, pressure, resistance, and motion, which usually commence immediately after the act of will. Inasmuch as, on the other hand, we are accustomed to disregard his duality and to deceive ourselves about it by means of the synthetic term I, a whole series of erroneous conclusions and consequently of false judgments about the will itself has become attached to the act of willing to such a degree that he who wills believes firmly that willing suffices for action, since in the majority of cases there has only been exercise of will, when the effect of the command, consequently obedience and therefore action, was to be expected. The appearance has translated itself into the sentiment, as if there were a necessity of effect. In a word, he who wills believes with a fair amount of certainty that will and action are somehow one. He ascribes the success, the carrying out of the willing, to the will itself, and thereby enjoys an increase of the sensation of power which accompanies all success. Freedom of will. That is the expression for the complex state of delight of the person exercising volition, who commands and at the same time identifies himself with the executioner of the order, who dang it, where was I? As such enjoys also the triumph over obstacles, but thinks within himself that it was really his own will that overcame them. In this way, the person exercises volition, adds the feelings of delight of his successful executive instruments, the useful under-wills, or under-souls. Indeed, our body is but a social structure composed of many souls. To his feelings of delight as commandment, what happens here is what happens in every well-constructed and happy commonwealth, namely that the governing class identifies itself with the success of the commanding and obeying, on the basis, as already said, of a social structure composed of many souls, on which account a philosopher should claim the right to include willing as much within the sphere of morals, regarded as the doctrine of the relations of supremacy under which the phenomenon of life manifests itself, that the separate philosophical ideas are not anything optional or autonomously evolving, but grow up in connection and relationship with each other, that however suddenly and arbitrarily they seem to appear in the history of thought, they nevertheless belong just as much to a system of the collective members of the fauna of a continent is betrayed in the end by the circumstances, how unfailingly the most diverse philosophers always fill in again a definite fundamental scheme of possible philosophies. I suppose a twist we could have it be revealed later that Sarge was only supporting Israel because they have a bigger army, so it would kill more foreigners. Yeah. Yeah, that'd work. America. Oh man, my back. Need to put this behind my back. Okay, here we go. I think I'm over here now. And we'll have characters questioning why he supports them, and he'll just keep saying shit like "trust the plan," like QAnon did. Alright, here we go. Arbitrarily, they seem to appear in the history of thought. They nevertheless belong just as much to a system as the collective members of the fauna of a continent is betrayed in the end by the circumstances, how unfailingly the most diverse philosophers always fill in again a definite fundamental scheme of possible philosophies. Under an invisible spell, they always revolve once more, in the same orbit, however, independent of each other. They may feel themselves, with their critical or systematic wills, something within them leads them, something impels them, in definite order, the one after the other, to wit, the innate methodology and relationship of their ideas. Their thinking is, in fact, far less a discovery than a re-recognizing, a remembering, a return and a homecoming to a far-off ancient common household of the soul, out of which those ideas formerly grew. Philosophizing is so far a kind of atavism of the highest order, the wonderful family resemblance of all Indian, Greek, and German philosophizing is easily enough explained, in fact, where there is affinity of language owing to the common philosophy of grammar. I mean owing to the unconscious domination and guidance of similar grammatical functions. It cannot but be that everything is prepared at the outset for a similar development and succession of philosophical systems. But as the way seems barred against certain other possibilities of world interpretation, it is highly probable that philosophers within the domain of the Ural-Altaic languages, where the conception of the subject is least developed, look otherwise into the world and will be found on paths of thought different from those of the Indo-Germans and Mussulmans. The spell of certain grammatical functions is ultimately also the spell of psychological valuations and racial conditions, so much by the way of rejecting Locke's superficiality with regard to the origin of ideas. The causa... And we'll have characters question... Oh yeah, I read that. I think I care more about consistency with Sarge than any other character. Mm-hmm. Man, I need water. But we changed Beaner's personality canonically because he took the red pill. He took a big fat red pill that morning, and thus his character changed. So in lore reason. Need more water? You know what, Angelo? I don't know why I'm not just calling you. I'm gonna call you now. Oh wait, I gotta charge my phone. I'll just talk to you on here until I charge my phone then. Because I got two phones. But that comes in handy at times like this, I guess. Ugh. I don't know. I don't know what to think of Nietzsche, because I think Nietzsche is kind of a contradictory philosopher, but maybe I just don't get it. I am probably overthinking it too much, but Sarge is the most prolific character. Prolific character, yeah. But I think it is good for him to be also a parody of conservatives and in their flaws, but like we already established that Sarge like obviously isn't supposed to be like a good person, because there's certain, like, obviously he's always willing to like do some horrible shit, but like but if this one's like too out of character, then I get it. Yeah, and that was his original purpose. I think maybe Sarge should have like phases with his character or something. I don't know though. Like maybe he supports Israel until he realizes they're the enemy. Like maybe he has like a super like uh like a super red pill moment. Or again, maybe it's all a ruse. Yeah. Because it's hard for me to think of him actually supporting any foreign country. Yeah, but I would say that a lot of people that like used to be real conservatives, like Sarge, are like the ones literally now saying like, yeah, let's support Israel. Like they wouldn't have done that in like the 1950s, but now, since it's now, and we have our like this I don't know. I feel like there was just a big change in the way everybody views everything. But Sarge probably should. I don't know. Maybe we should make him represent more like a Sarge should be like so base to a cartoonish level. Like, so maybe it shouldn't be him supporting Israel, because maybe his quality should be more. Yeah, so I think it should be an arc, but it ends in a twist where he was doing it for ulterior motives. Yeah. Or what if it's one of Sarge's heroes? Like one of Sarge's heroes supports Israel? Because that could work too. Like, and like he has to realize that his hero is actually like not based because he's a cuck for Israel. Yeah. Because now that I think about it, in episodes like Sarge is like what do you call it? Sarge is like the moral basis of every episode. Like I feel like he is always the one that has like the thing to say about the episode. Like he's basically the Kyle of it, who gives the lesson of it. Because like yeah, I think Sarge, you actually have made Sarge consistently have like the based take. Like even if it's not morally right, but he has the based take on everything. The cause soit. I don't know what these words are, and they don't show me what they are in English, so I'll never know. Is the best self contradiction that has yet been conceived. It is a. I don't know, I'm just thinking it out. There's multiple ways to approach it. Yeah. It is a sort of logical violation and unnaturalness, but the extravagant pride of man has managed to entangle itself profoundly and frightfully with this very folly, the desire for freedom of will in the superlative metaphysical sense, such as still holds away. Unfortunately, in the minds of the half-educated, the desire to bear the entire and ultimate responsibility for one's actions oneself, and to absolve God, the world, ancestors, chance, and society, their form, involves nothing less than to be precisely this cause I don't know what this word is. Cause and with more than Munchausen daring to pull oneself up into existence by the hair out of the slough of nothingness, if any one should find out in this manner the crass stupidity of the celebrated conception of free will, and put it out of his head altogether, I beg of him to carry his enlightenment a step further, and also put out of his head the contrary of this monstrous conception of free will. I mean, non-free will. I want my slaw. Which is tantamount to a misuse of cause and effect. One should not wrongly materialize cause and effect, as the natural philosophers do, and whoever like them naturalize in thinking at present. According to the prevailing mechanical doltishness, okay, which makes the cause press and push until it affects its end, one should use cause and effect only as pure conceptions, that is to say, as conventional fictions, for the purpose of designation and mutual understanding, not for explanation. In being in itself, there is nothing of casual connection, of a necessity, or of psychological non-freedom. There the effect does not follow the cause, their law does not obtain. It is we alone who have devised cause, sequence, reciprocity, relativity, constraint, number, law, freedom, motive, and purpose. And when we interpret and intermix this symbol world as being in itself with things, we act once more as we have always acted, mythologically. The non-free will is mythology. In real life, it is only a question of strong and weak wills. It is almost always symptom of what is lacking in himself. When a thinker in every casual connection and psychological necessity manifests something of compulsion, indigence, obsequiousness, obsequiousness, oppression, and non-freedom, it is suspicious to have
such observed correctly, the non-freedom of the will is regarded as a problem from two entirely opposite standpoints, but always in a profoundly personal manner. Some will not give up their responsibility, their belief in themselves, the personal right to their merits at any price. The vain wishes of belong to this class. Others, on the contrary, do not wish to be answerable for anything or blamed for anything, and owing on an inward self-contempt, seek to get out of the business, no matter how. The latter, when they write books, are in the habit at present of taking the side of criminals. A sort of socialistic sympathy is their favorite disguise, and as a matter of fact, the fatalism of the weak-willed embellishes itself surprisingly. So yeah, definitely not a socialist, like some people have said. Like are in habit at present of taking the side of criminals. A sort of socialistic sympathy is their favorite disguise. That's pretty and as a matter of fact, the fatalism of the weak-willed embellishes itself surprisingly when it can pose a la religion de la souffrance humaine, that is, its good taste. Is that what that means? Okay. Let me be pardoned as an old philologist. Okay, as an old philologist, you will be pardoned. Who cannot detest from the desist from the mischief of putting his finger on bad modes of interpretation, but nature's conformity to law, of which you physicists talk so proudly, is as though, why, it exists only owing to your interpretation and bad philology. It is no matter of fact, no text, but rather just a naively humanitarian adjustment and perversion of meaning, with which you make abundant concessions to the democratic instincts of the modern soul. Everywhere equality before the law, nature is not different in the respect nor better than we, a fine instance of secret motive in which the vulgar antagonism to everything privileged and autocratic, likewise a second and more refined atheism, is once more disguised. Ne du ne mitir matra. That also is what you want, and therefore cheers for natural law. Is it not so? But as been said, that is interpretation, not text, and somebody might come along who, with opposite intentions and modes of interpretation, I guess the issue is I made Sarge so extreme at the start. It's a shift to try and make him mainstream. Yeah. Could read out of the same nature and with regard to the same phenomena, just the tyrannically inconsiderate and relentless enforcement of the claims of power. An interpreter who should so place the unexceptionalness and unconditionalness of all will to power before your eyes, that almost every word, and the word tyranny itself, would eventually seem unsuitable, or like a weakening and softening metaphor, as being too human, and who should nevertheless end by asserting the same about this world as you do, namely that it has a necessary and calculable course, not however because laws obtain in it, but because they are absolutely lacking, and every power affects its ultimate consequences every moment, granted that it also is. Imagine a metaphor. Only interpretation, and you will be eager enough to make this objection. Well, so much the better. All psychology hitherto has run aground on moral prejudices and timidities. Timidities. Look at them timidities, bro.
I'm into timidities. Oh, I don't know where I was. I was at timidities, I know that. Timidities not. It is not dared to launch out into the depths. Into the depths. Into the depths. He said it. It's exactly as I described wearing shirts. In so far as it is allowable to recognize in that which has hitherto been written evidence of that which has hitherto been kept silent, it seems as if nobody had yet harbored the notion of psychology as the morphology and development doctrine of the will to power, as I conceive of it. The power of moral prejudices has penetrated deeply into the most intellectual world, the world apparently most indifferent and unprejudiced, and has obviously operated in an injurious, obstructive, blinding, and distorting manner. A proper psychology has to contend with unconscious antagonism in the heart of the investigator. It has the heart against it. Even a doctrine of the reciprocal conditionalness of the good and the bad impulses causes as refined immorality, distress, and aversion in a still strong and manly conscience, still more so a doctrine of the derivation of all good impulses from bad ones. If, however, a person should regard even the emotions of hatred, envy, covetousness, and imperiousness as life conditioning emotions, as factors which must be present fundamentally and essentially and developed if life is to be further developed, he will suffer from such a view of things as from a seasickness, and yet the hypothesis is far from being the strangest and most painful in the immense and almost new domain of dangerous knowledge, and there are in fact 100 good reasons why everyone should keep away from it who can do so. On the other hand, if one has once drifted hither with one's bark, well, very good, now let us set our teeth firmly. Let us open our eyes and keep our hand fast on the helm. We sail away right over morality, we crush out, we destroy perhaps the remains of our own morality by daring to make our voyage thither. But what do we matter? Never yet did a profounder world of insight reveal itself to daring travelers and adventurers, and the psychologist who thus makes a sacrifice is not the sacrificio del intelletto of the on the contrary, will at least be entitled to demand in return that psychology shall once more be recognized as the queen of the sciences, for whose service and equipment the other sciences exist. For psychology is once more the path of the fundamental problems. The power of moral prejudice compels you. Damn it, didn't I have something to... I thought I had a thing I was using as a bookmark. What did I do with that? What did I do? You know what? I'm switching to another book. What shall it be? I guess I'll read more Fountainhead. Who'd win in a fight, Larry the Cable Guy or Larry the Cucumber? I think Larry Larry the Cucumber would kick Larry the Cable Guy's ass because he has the power of God and cucumbers on his side. Even Mr. Rourke can talk sense sometimes. I know I've read this part already, but how much of this did I already read? I don't freaking know. Who cares? I'll reread this whole darn thing. Oy vey. Even Mr. Rourke can talk sense sometimes, said Mrs. Keating. Even if he does talk like a truck driver. See? I definitely read that. Do you really think that I do good work? Keating looked at... Yeah, I'm past this. I'm past this already. Because I accidentally knocked myself out of the page I was on, so I don't even know where I'm at now. Yeah, you've read this part like 4 times. Well... Hans Keating's eyes froze, darkening for 1/10 of a second. Yeah, I know, it's all fake. He's doing a character making fun of rednecks, and then, like, rednecks are like, oh, that's literally me. I'm retarded, too. This is funny. I feel so represented right now. See, I can laugh at myself. I'm an idiot. Pulls out giant, cartoonishly oversized hammer, starts hitting himself in the head. I'm a stupid redneck. That's funny right there. I don't care who you are. That's funny right there. I'm an idiot. I hate redneck comedy, if I'm being honest. Because it's always like, yeah, I'm stupid, but you love me for it. Heart, heart, heart. I have a Confederate flag, but I don't even believe in what it stands for. Same unless it's something like Tucker and Dale. Yeah. You know what? I think right now I'm just gonna stream, and I'm gonna start a new stream where I'm playing Silent Hill 2, and then I'll call you then. So I'm ending it now, so... Later, nigga! Oh, wait. I was gonna click end, and then it popped a thing up that said, "Are you sure you want to stop streaming?" So it didn't work. So now this ending's really